By the end of the swinging 60s, Rangers were some way off being the biggest force in Scottish, let alone European football.
Isn't it very nice to be a Rangers player?
Grown-up men crying and weeping about the fact that it happened.
But the arrival of a new, no-nonsense management looked like it was set to deliver.
Rangers, quite frankly, were in crisis. They needed a leadership figure. They needed a Bill Struth-like character.
Took it by the throat and got us back in the road again.
Only for the most traumatic event in the history of our game to overshadow any on-field revival.
There was just a mass of bodies lying one on top of the other in twisted metal and people shouting and screaming for help.
Nobody spoke. Everybody was just in deep shock.
And yet at one game in 1972, this despair could be laid to rest if Rangers could just defeat Moscow Dinamo's finest on a crazy night in Barcelona.
He says you will be immortalised by Rangers fans for the rest of your life.
This was the only chance they had to win anything that season, a European final. And he began to wobble. The legs began to go.
This is Glasgow, city of 1 million souls, the third largest city in the United Kingdom, straddling 50 square miles of the Strath of Clyde.
Glasgow is an unusual city in many ways, but the strength of the football teams is undeniable.
Sweetest little baby, come and deliver.
No other city in the world can boast two teams of such trophy-winning traditions as Celtic and Rangers. Or is that Rangers and Celtic?
Rivalry is essential in Glasgow. Glasgow has got that rivalry. It will always have that rivalry.
Their competitions made Scottish football.
And it's Celtic to kick off here at Ibrox in this most exciting of all club matches in Britain.
As every Rangers fan knows, Celtic were the Scottish team of the late 1960s. Led by captain Billy McNeill, they would march on to win a record-breaking 9 league titles in a row.
We were an aggressive shower of players. We were determined to be successful. We didn't like losing, and we used to wind them up a lot.
Not only was the domestic game in their vice-like grip, but there was also that small matter of Celtic being the first British club to lift the European Cup in 1967. Celtic had sent a message to the world that the Glasgow team to watch wore green and white.
Rangers and Celtic are always measured against each other. And with Celtic having won a European trophy, it was like they had one-upmanship with their supporters.
Wasn't it very nice to be a Rangers player? The difference was Jock Stein.
Jock Stein had been captain of Celtic in the early 1950s.
The player now, just ordinary, very ordinary.
But it was his return to the club as manager in 1965 that would set him apart. His hands-on approach transformed a team of underachieving local lads into European champions, leaving a struggling Rangers in their wake.
For many of the games, we felt we were playing against 12 players rather than 11.
Oh, come on, Frank. If you can't give it to me, I can't give you it back.
Jock had come from the other side of the divide, as it were, brought up in Blantyre, very much a Rangers community. His father, when Celtic played Rangers, his father never wished him well. He couldn't bring himself to wish him well, being a Rangers man.
I'm quite sure, and no disrespect to the managers we had at that time, that if Jock Stein had had us, then I think we would have won the league quite a lot as well.
As they say, if you've got a good conductor and an orchestra, we didn't have the best conductors at Ibrox at the time.
Rangers' failure to rise to the challenge of Celtic's dominance had cost Scott Simon his job in 1967. His replacement, David White, barely got his feet under the table in Rangers terms before being shown the door in 1969. The task of halting Celtic now fell to ex-chair William Deedle Wardle, who was coaxed out of retirement to rally Rangers.
He was the only provincial manager to win the league with Kilmarnock in 1965, which was a great achievement. I can still see him running onto the pitch at Tynecastle with a white raincoat on, you know. And the Deedle was some man. I mean, he was a hard man, but he knew his football.
Willie Waddle has gone mad. He's running onto the field. Waddle's being hugged by supporters, by players. And if ever a man has gone out of Scottish football with a blaze of glory, it's Willie Waddle.
When Rangers brought in Willie Waddle, I remembered Willie Waddle as a hero, you know, in 1949 in Jimmy Cowan's Wembley. He tore the English defence apart and Scotland won 3-1.
Cool and confident, they show superb ball control. None better than Willie Waddle, number 7.
Willie Waddle was probably one of the greatest wingers ever to play for Rangers. I saw Waddle play myself when I was a kid, and he was a phenomenal player. Strong, fast, cross a great ball. I mean, he was one of the legends of Rangers.
Willie Waddle had played under Bill Struth, who's probably the greatest ever manager that Rangers had. Bill Struth was the manager for 34 years, and he set down standards and what was expected, a lot of the traditions of the club.
Rangers, quite frankly, were in crisis. They needed a leadership figure. They needed a Bill Struth-like character.
To my mind, in footballing terms, he didn't match Steen, but he was the right man for Rangers at that time.
He came into the club but took it by the throat and got us back in the road again.
Waddle was certainly no tracksuit manager like Steen. The task of whipping the Rangers players into shape would fall to another jock, Jock Wallace. He was infamous as the man responsible for one of Scotland's and Rangers' biggest cup upsets.
They lost to Berwick, if you remember, in 1967. Jock Wallace was the manager, goalkeeper, and had a magnificent game, and Sammy Reid scored 1 goal. I'm not kidding, I was sick at losing to Berwick.
Jock Wallace was a young coach who was starting to make a name for himself. He had had success with Berwick, he had went to Hearts, so Willie Waddle approached him, and he started at Rangers as the Willie Waddle the manager and Jock as the coach.
Jock would prove to be the kick up the proverbials that the underperforming Rangers players needed with his harsh regime of fitness and discipline.
Jock was the perfect sort of, you know, it wasn't a good cop, bad cop. They were both bad cops in terms of, hey, you do it or you don't, you know.
Look at the ball going in front of you. Every last bully when you keep the ball moving.
Jock was a culture shock, mainly because of the training we did.
We all thought the world of him, really, until he brought us to Ghislaine Sands, and then we didn't feel so good about him then.
Jock introduced his notorious team exercises on the sand dunes of Ghislaine, dubbed Murder Hill by the players.
He hammered us at training. I mean, the first training sessions were shocking. There was bodies all over the place.
You want them to be wanting to win, you know, they've got to have the atmosphere about them, and this is when the mood's switching on. And they're always crabbing when they come back for Gillingham because they've worked hard, you know. So they're right to be crabbing.
They were a good team, and Waddle let him get on with making them sharper, fitter and more determined.
He gave us that belief in ourselves, and between him and Willie Waddle it was a great partnership.
You could start to see a fresh impetus, a bigger drive to win things. So it was starting to take shape, so you could see things happening.
New manager, new coach,
McDonald,
new decade, new era. And things are definitely working for Rangers. With goals aplenty on the road to the League Cup of 1970, including a 6-0 demolition of Dunfermline Athletic.
Johnston still has it and walks right through the defence. Amazing.
But as the Rangers fans knew, the only way to judge the effect of this new management on the squad was beating Celtic.
It's an unbelievable experience playing in an Old Firm game. To play in an Old Firm game, any player in the world will tell you they would love to play in the games.
The most important game that we played in this country was Rangers. That was the most important game to Big Jock. He wanted to win that game.
And here's a terrible mistake there by John Gregg. Let's Conley, and he just dribbles it in.
If you're a Rangers player or a Celtic player and you score against the other part of the Old Firm, you become very popular with your supporters.
It's a great feeling when you beat the other side.
And the Rangers team of Waddle and Wallace would get their chance in the League Cup final at Hampden on the 24th of October 1970. But unbelievably, Rangers were 4 years without a trophy win. The players may have been confident, but no one else was. The game would prove a baptism of fire for 16-year-old Derek Johnston on his Old Firm debut.
And there was 106,000 there. It was just unbelievable. And you looked to the left and it was blue, and you looked to the right, it was green. It was just fantastic to be there.
Before the game, you're aware of the crowd. But when the game starts, you've got to concentrate.
I found myself when the ball was going out for a throw and just looking at the crowd and just trying to get all the atmosphere in. It was only then when I think it was Greggy that shouted to me, you know, I don't know how to say this politely, waking up.
Henderson to McDonald. Johnston. Steen and Derek Johnston out in front.
I always remember Billy McNeil was in front of me and Jim Craig at the back, and I managed somehow, I don't know, to get in between them. Scoring in the end where your own fans were, and seeing everybody jump up at the same time, it's something that will never ever be forgotten as far as I'm concerned.
The first one is always important because you're starting to break the mould, and what that does is it gives everybody a belief that you can do it. It gives the supporters a belief, and it takes a bit of pressure off.
That was the start of us, you know, but we realised we could win something. Once we won one, we were going to win something else. We were starting to become a team.
Yet just as Rangers were proving to their fans that they could challenge Celtic, a horrific event at their next Glasgow derby would throw the team into turmoil.
Nobody knows what's ahead of them, in front of them. And before you knew it, the disaster was happening.
January the 2nd, 1971, the traditional Nerdy game, where it had been 50 years since Celtic had last recorded a victory in this fixture at Ibrox. For the players, and especially the 80,000 fans, this meant everything.
You always knew getting into the Nerdy game that you wanted to keep that. You always wanted to beat Celtic at any time, but you wanted to keep these records going forever.
Lennox. And that's as near as we'll get it today.
In the last minute of the game, I had a shot that came off the other side of the bar, and Jimmy's went in and headed it in.
And it's a goal, and Johnston has scored.
So it's time up, we think.
Johnston has scored with 1 minute to go.
Yet Jimmy Johnston's goal wouldn't prove to be a winner.
Rangers 0, Celtic 1. About 30 seconds to go.
Rangers took centre, got a free kick, and lo and behold, Colin Sean scored.
We got lined up, and Rangers scored for the free kick.
And it's a goal! Dramatic finish! There it is!
The 2 goals came in a minute.
Rangers 1, Celtic 1. What a finish to a tremendous game!
With the last kick of the game, Rangers had salvaged a point and more importantly denied Celtic a historic win.
Delighted that we got the equaliser, and that was good. The record was still intact.
As the mist began to descend on Ibrox, the 80,000 crowd began to make their way from the ground. But soon the Rangers fans' joy at that last-minute equaliser would be replaced with terror as events at one specific exit, Stairway 13, unfolded.
Now, this has been very serious indeed. From where I'm sitting high up here in the press box, through the darkness and the fog, the ambulances are still there at that certain spot beneath the east terracing where I think a crash barrier gave way.
The rail and supports were going, and the pressure was getting intense. You heard the people shouting, get back, get back. And then it kind of went silent because nobody could shout. Everything was getting squashed from you, it was getting squeezed from you. Your air was getting squeezed out your lungs. I crawled over people at the height of the pillars and fell down the grass slopes.
Just shortly after the game finished, one of our officers came over and said, take your group up to the top of the stairway, there seems to be a bit of a problem.
The officers patrolled, watched what was happening, and then sent the first aiders in. And the first aider going into a crowd could be away for a long time because the crowd was, tightly packed.
We were having to push our way, force our way really, through the crowd. And as we got to the edge of the bowl, just to the rim, there was a group of police officers forming a cordon at that point.
Well, halfway down, there must have been a young boy, threw his coat up in the air. As that came down, of course, the little boy was stuck and he fell down. Of course, one after another, they all came down.
Somebody's fallen or that, and it's caused a bit of a problem. I mean, somebody's fallen, so we just send down. But the sort of sound was, well, there's more than one, and there seemed to be a lot of activity, so get everybody down there to see if we can help.
It was littered with people moaning and people shouting for help.
There was just a mass of bodies lying one on top of the other in twisted metal, and people shouting and screaming for help.
By that time, all hell had let loose. Everybody was running everywhere, and there was people and police and the ambulance men trying to dig their way in to get people away.
The disaster lives with me all the time because I was the last person in the dressing room. They were bringing bodies into the dressing room, and I couldn't envisage what had happened.
People, we knew something had happened, but we weren't quite entirely sure what it was. I always remember Dr. Fitzsimmons coming into the dressing room and talking to Big Jock, and that was possibly the first indication that Big Jock was getting that something serious had happened.
Jock Stein and Willie Waddle arrived at the scene, as did both the doctors from both the clubs and some of the other officials. Sadly, by that time there was very little could be done for the majority of the spectators. But the job of assisting to carry the dead down to the trackside or to the mortuary, everybody was involved, no matter their allegiance to whatever club.
The thing that sticks in my mind was somebody dealing with a young child and the father shouting, "You've got to do something." And it was no use.
I vividly remember our last trip down the terracing when we had been stood down. The job had been completed, and there were bodies and stretchers stretching from the halfway line right up to the corner flag and across the back of the goal line. And looking down on that line of stretchers, that will never, ever, ever be erased from my memory.
It has been pandemonium beneath us here, and I have no doubt everything possible is being done. But the latest report I have had is that it is and has been a very, very serious accident indeed, and there's just no saying how many fatalities there may have been.
I remember leaving the stadium and somebody at the door had said that 8 people had died. And by the time I was getting a lift home to Edinburgh, by the time it just went up 16, 18, 28, 40, and it just kept going up,
I got sent my way out the main door of Ibrox and headed home. I stayed in Broomhill and in Partick and got the subway and things that you start to think back and I sat in the subway and there's not a word spoken. Nobody spoke. Everybody was just in deep shock. And I got out into Partick and I was walking. I usually walk up to it's the Broomhill flats we're staying, and it takes about 10-minute walk. And an old boy came up and said, "Look, son, you better get home." And it just hadn't dawned of what actually was happened, behind me there, and obviously to the extent of 66 people dying.
When I got there, Jock Stein was just coming out the front door, and I always remember this. Somebody said to him from the pack of reporters there, "Were you disappointed in Rangers getting that equaliser?" And Stein paused and looked at him and said, "Look, I've just been coming from dead bodies out there. Families are already suffering, and you're asking me about the game."
As the press and the country looked to Rangers following the horrors of that fateful day, manager Willie Waddle personally took charge of the club's response.
We have asked them to make contact with the people concerned, find out when the funerals are. By tomorrow morning we hope to have a complete list so that they can attend the funerals.
On the Monday morning we were all brought in, everybody, every member of staff was brought in. You'd have to say Willie Waddle was absolutely magnificent. He explained everything that had happened, told us what we were going to do. We went to all the hospitals. We didn't train for a fortnight, and all we did is went to various hospitals, seen the supporters. I don't know if we did any good or anything like that, but you felt a wee bit awkward because they had suffered and some of them had lost their friends and that, but we did attend. And then the next again week, there was always a Rangers representative was at every funeral.
I stayed in Fife, and there was 5 or 6 young boys from Markinch who were killed in the disaster, and we went to all the funerals, and you remember it, and you're hoping you're going to give something back to the fans that went away.
It got to me, it really got to me. The football was football. We loved football, but for that to happen at a football game it was very depressing, and it took me a long time to go over it.
Most of the times, the families were pleased to see us. Well, I say pleased, weren't pleased, but they respected the fact that we came along. There wasn't a couple of occasions when they were angry. And I can fully understand that, because their loved ones go to a football match and don't come back. How can you go to a football match and not come back from it?
The Edwards disaster, to me, actually helped to, what's the word I'm looking for, dilute the bigotry in Rangers and Celtic. It was, Jock Stein was involved in the funerals, went to funerals, Rangers, all their staff went to funerals. Jock Stein was out there helping to bring bodies to the side to be identified and all that. It's an occasion, sad and tragic though it was, that brings people together rather than, separates them. And, Celtic and Rangers, I think, became closer because of that tragedy.
On the 5th of January, a memorial mass was held at St Andrew's Cathedral, attended by both clubs.
The Lord Provost, Sir Donald Liddell, represented the city of Glasgow, and the congregation was made up of many denominations from all walks of life, including some relatives of the 66 who died in the disaster.
It was one time when both clubs were strongly united, because the whole thing affected everyone. The fact that the bulk of the people who suffered were Rangers supporters didn't mean a thing, because it was great sympathy from the Celtic support and from the Celtic Football Club. And in that period, both clubs were strongly united, and it was unusual, but it was nice to see.
From the ashes of the terrible disaster, the Rangers team vowed that they would honour the people who had lost their lives watching them play.
It's an important juncture in the club's history, and that they have to do something to try and erase the terrible memories of the season before.
This would take them and their fans on a remarkable journey to the heady heights of European football.
Jock says the only thing you can do to make these people's lives a bit happier, because you know what they're feeling, you're feeling it now, is to go out there and win games and win trophies. We wanted to do it for them.
"1971 had been a traumatic season for Rangers. In the end, they finished 15 points adrift of Celtic in a disappointing 4th, and also lost to them in the Scottish Cup final. Yet this defeat at the hands of their greatest rivals would prove to be the making of the team. Celtic, as League and Scottish Cup champions, could only enter one European competition, their beloved European Cup, leaving Rangers, as losing finalists, free to become the Scottish representatives in Europe's Cup Winners' Cup. A competition all too vivid in the memory of the Rangers players, as they'd lost in the 1967 final to Germany's Bayern Munich.
After the 67 game we lost in Nuremberg, you always want to try and get to another final and hope you're going to win. So once you start the campaign again, you're hoping that you're going to get further and further.
When I played in '67, I was just a young lad. I was only 18. I was just happy to be there. I'm just happy to play. You know, at that time you think, oh, there'll be plenty of European finals and that, but the reality of that is it's not the case. You're very naive. And for myself, Willie Johnson and John Gregg, I think you knew that these things didn't come along all that too often. Also that the whole team understood about getting a European trophy to be equal, if you like, with Celtic.
So there was great rivalry between the two to land a European prize. Celtic did it, and therefore the impact on Rangers was profound.
Chairman Bob Kelly put the European Cup in the place that somehow had been waiting for it ever since.
As Rangers geared up for their European campaign, their mighty rivals were about to offer them a bit of light relief, all thanks to Partick Thistle and the League Cup final. Thistle's previous win over one of the old firm in a cup competition was 1921, when they beat Rangers 1-0 in the Scottish Cup. So 50 years later, Thistle's chances, this time against Celtic, were all but written off.
And here at Hampden Park, it's going to be Celtic kicking off, attacking the goal on the right in the final of the Scottish Cup.
Dave McParlin's newly promoted team were viewed as mere cannon fodder for Jock Stein's Celtic.
I think it was a matter of us just turning up at Hampden Park and Celtic had handed the cup. I mean, if they'd done it before, it saved them a lot of bother.
McQuaid, a quick shot, and it wasn't far away.
As we walked into the dressing room, Lou Macari turned around to Bobby Laurie and said, at least you'll get a runners-up medal. So, that really was a galvaniser if we needed one before the game.
McQuaid! Fantastic business going on in the goal here. What a sensation!
I always felt if you let nerves get the better of you, you're never going to go out on a park and perform.
The first goal kick of the match to be taken by Alan Ruff of Partick Thistle.
I was always quite jovial, I was always quite, relaxed and laid back. But obviously deep down I'd be kidding myself on if I was saying I wasn't panicking that day. I was only 19 years of age and never played in anything before.
Half of the guys were part-time and half of them were full-time. If you look at the League Cup final team, it's probably 50-50.
They'll all be catched. You're going to get a doing this week, and you're going to. But at the end of the day, I just said to them, "We can't lose here, so just go out and just play the way you can, and that's it." We scored 4 goals in the first half,
and it's stopped almost on the line. Still not clear. Down to Ray, and it's a goal. Ray scores for Thistle. So what a dream start for Thistle. Laurie, edge of the box, inside, right foot shot to the far side, and it's there.
I was fortunate enough that day in the first half I had absolutely the hee-haw to do. I think I came for a couple of crosses. Nothing spectacular. I don't even think I had a save on. I was just a spectator for that 45 minutes and just watching 4 shots hitting the back of the net.
Chance for Thistle. McQuaid scores.
We were keyed up. We were ready to play.
Taken by Laurie. In comes Bourne. Walks the ball into the net. It's 4-0.
I kept looking at my watch and I kept going, oh God, I hope it's not going to get 45 minutes. Can we not just keep going? Sort of a thing. But obviously half-time had to come.
The word stupefaction comes to mind after about 25 minutes when I had to pinch myself and realise what the score was. And then at half-time, I simply could not believe this. And then it occurred to me, it showed you about Stein's majesty at the time. His aura of invincibility that he put out about him. It suddenly, I was actually thinking, he just told them, give them a 4-goal lead, and then in the second half, we'll show them what's what. That is actually what went through my mind.
It was 4-0 at half time and it comes through at Ibrox. They were all jumping up and down. I think half the Rangers crowd went out to Hampden, bought a Partick Thistle scarf on the way out because they knew they were going to see Thistle live in the cup.
We all knew. Well, I knew, and I think most of the other guys knew that this Celtic team were capable of scoring 4 or 5, wherever they felt like it. So, in true Partick Thistle tradition, I mean, it could have quite easily get beat 6-4.
I thought that we would win. I must admit, I didn't play. Bobby Lennox didn't play in that game, but nevertheless, I mean, Celtic had a very good team on the park, a very strong side in the park.
Celtic players, they maybe just didn't understand that we could play a wee bit. And it was too late by the time they made their minds up that we could.
And it's all over, and it's Thistle's cup.
Grown-up men crying and weeping about the fact that it happened.
A magnificent performance by Thistle, who finally, once and for all and emphatically, have put paid to the unpredictable tag. And you can hear the whole of Hampden rising to Thistle. David, first of all, congratulations on what was a magnificent victory. Did you really feel the underdogs today when you drove up to Hampden in the bus?
Well, the bookies had made us underdogs, but as I say, we had nothing to lose and everything to gain.
We shall not be moved.
Nobody had the open top bus, which you usually have. We had I remember us all in this wee single bus, and somebody had said, "Oh, we need to get the cup. You have to get the cup out to let the supporters know." And all we had was a skylight in a wee single bus. We couldn't get the skylight open to get the cup out, so it was practically hopeless.
There comes the cup, with Alan Ruff, the goalkeeper, carrying it.
Their party would be short-lived, though, as a week later Thistle faced Aberdeen and got stuffed 7-2.
That was as League Cup winners one week, defeated 7-2 the next week. So somebody says it's just Partick Thistle, isn't it?
Rangers, for all their domestic woes, were on the road in Europe. They'd beaten French team Rennes and now faced sporting, as many Rangers fans would tell you, bloody Lisbon. They took with them a 3-2 lead from the first leg at Ibrox. A bad-tempered game lay ahead, marred by a career-ending leg break to Ronnie McKinnon.
Every football player dreads one thing, and that's breaking a leg.
Oh, that was a bad one. The boy done him.
One of the worst tackles I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, you heard that a mile away. Really, really bad one.
Finally, after extra time had finished, 4-3 to Sporting, 6 each on aggregate, tie to Rangers on the away goal. You'd think.
The away goals counted, but the referee didn't know that, and he made us take the penalties.
I think we missed every one of them, if I can remember, or we scored 1 out of the 5.
Willie Waddle says, you take the last one, John, that might be important. I said, fine. I didn't get a chance to take it, because every player in our team missed one, including Davy Smith. We got to retake it and missed it again.
But we're beaten anyway, and the heads were down. I can remember the Lisbon players getting carried around the pitch and their fans were cheering away. They thought that was them, through to the next round.
A guy from the Daily Mail newspaper, a guy called John Fairgrieve, who was a good pal of Willie Waddle's, came in and says, look, I've just checked that rule book. He says, I think the referee's made a mistake. I think you're through.
Confusion reigned. The rule books came out. Waddle met with UEFA, and lo and behold, Rangers were through.
From a dressing room that was dead, it just became alive again.
He came back in and says, we're through because of the away goals. And that was it, party time.
Spurred on by the dramatic events in Lisbon, Rangers continued on their European adventure. Italian giants Torino were the next team to be knocked out in the quarter-finals. A dramatic semi-final night in Glasgow lay in store. Rangers would be 90 minutes away from the European Cup Winners' Cup final. All they had to do was defeat old adversaries, Bayern Munich. The 19th of April 1972. European semis night in Glasgow. Both sides of the old firm are each just one game away from Europe's top 2 footballing finals.
In a country where you've only got something like 5 million people, you've got a game like that, or 2 games like that, where there's a massive support in both teams. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Look at that and tell us that this is not a footballing nation. It is a football nation and it's different class.
It was just that great atmosphere about the whole city, that there's 2 semi-finals to be played.
Remarkably, the teams they face were the very same opponents from their 1967 finals. Inter Milan were looking for revenge for their defeat by Celtic. And as for Rangers, well, they're looking to settle old scores against Bayern Munich and go into the game having earned a precious 1-1 draw in Germany.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Hier ist das Ibrox Park Stadion in Glasgow.
They were a good team, but we knew after the game in Munich, the first leg, we had a right good chance at Ibrox.
I always remember before we came out, Jock gives you the usual team talk, blah, blah, blah. And as we're coming down the tunnel, he said, look, if we can get an early goal and get the crowd behind us, I don't know how they're going to react.
Und mit in diesen Tonfall einzufallen.
Within 75 seconds, Jock Wallace would get his answer thanks to Sandy Jardine.
Sandy Jardine got us off to a great start. He'll tell you it was a great shot with his left foot, but it was a miss kick because his left foot was hopeless.
I did score a goal. Whether it was wonderful or not, I'll let others judge.
Sandy scores a great goal, or a fluke. After that was, as I say, it was party time for us. We knew we could beat them.
It took the roof off of Ibrox. It was magnificent, and from then on, I don't think we were in danger in the game. I think we got such a lift from that. Derek Parling got the second goal, not long afterwards, and at 2-0, there was no way we were going to be beaten in that one.
That game was one of our easiest games. We got a great result, and I always remember coming into the dressing room. For some reason, the Celtic game was on the telly, and they went to extra time. And I remember sitting at the telly and watching the penalties.
The fickle finger of fate had spoken to Dixie Deans in the build-up to the match. And I said, what if it goes to penalties? Oh, I said, no problem there. He said, I've been practising all week and I've scored 12 out of 12. And of course, as every Celtic fan knows, he missed the first one. And that was it.
And Dixie Deans misses it.
Unfortunately, Dixie blasted it over the bar. You got a wee cheer for that, I have to say. And unfortunately, Celtic got knocked out.
And you can imagine the despair that Deans feels at this moment.
Barcelona!
Rangers were off to, Barcelona for their date with destiny against Moscow Dynamo, and with them, an invasion of red, white and blue. Charter flights, buses and probably a few old bangers took 16,000 to Catalonia.
We've got to show our respect over there anyway.
In contrast, the Moscow Dynamo fans had the small hurdle of the Iron Curtain to cross. So needless to say, the Camp Nou was a home from home for the Rangers support.
Waddle considers one of the dangers. There's Rangers team.
Everywhere was a mass of red, white and blue. Absolute tremendous atmosphere. And I was just in an absolute high, at the final, and hopefully see Rangers win the cup.
We knew how hard it was when you got beat. So we're saying to ourselves, this time in Barcelona, we're not going to get beat.
We won nothing this year. The fans have turned up still, to cheer us on. We need to win it for them.
Off we go.
Dynamo took centre, and John Gregg clattered their best player in about 10 seconds. And I went, oh well, that's him being told. He's been marked.
There was more physical contact in the game in those days, and if you gave it, you had to take it back.
Alec MacDonald to John Gregg.
Very important. John was one fantastic captain. I knew where Dave Smith was going to put the ball, and I got a run on the ball and I scored my header.
2-0 up at half-time, and Jock says the game's not finished. He says they have to come out in the second half and play, because they're out. I mean, it's their best chance of winning the trophy as well. They have to come out and attack us. Be wary the first 10 or 15 minutes. If they get a goal back, they're right back in the game.
Mindful of the expected Russian fight back, the Rangers players decided attack would be the best form of defence.
But I remember when we scored the third goal, running up to Willie Johnston, we scored it, and saying to him, that's it, bud, we can't lose now.
I remember a Rangers supporter coming, and we were right down a terrible commentary position, right down almost a worm's eye view of the game, right down at the front. And he came And he sat beside me and he had a bottle of Fundador, which is firewater, as you probably know. And he was pouring it into this plastic cup and trying to... I'm doing the commentary, and he started, because Rangers had won. They're 3 up at that stage. And then all of a sudden, the Russians score 2 goals. And Rangers are wobbling. Remember, Rangers had won. This was the only chance they had to win anything that season, a European final. And they began to wobble. The legs began to go. The nerves were jangling.
You go to the final and you're 3-0 up. And all of a sudden, you go, oh, no, please don't let this happen to us.
When it went to 3-2, I was beginning to get a little bit worried, and I kept saying to the referee, blow your whistle, blow the whistle. Not as politely as that, but... and the fans kept coming onto the park in the last 2 or 3 minutes of the game.
Everybody was ready at the sides, ready for the final whistle. And when it did come on, it really was a fight for survival.
I was off. The only man that beat me that night was Colin Steen. Steenie was in the tunnel before me. It was the first time he ever beat me in a sprint. And I just seen him all come on, I just ran for the tunnel. I knew what was going to happen.
Waddle, Wallace and the players had done it. Against the odds, Rangers were champions of Europe. But with the chaos on the park, UEFA had decided there would be no cup presentation.
I'd always envisaged Billy McNeill lifting the European Cup in Lisbon in '67, and not so much from a personal point of view, but I thought, well, we'll get the chance to do that for our supporters tonight, which was quickly told we couldn't do it because there was problems in the field.
The fans come onto the pitch. I was expecting Rangers to go up and get a cup, and then, you know, the fans to stand and watch it. But the next thing, there was battens. The boys were, you know, fond. And I went, oh, for God's sake.
Unaware of the events transpiring on the pitch, the players celebrated their historic win. Captain John Gregg, though, was missing, having been spirited away by the men in suits.
There was a few guys standing about who I think were obviously UEFA officials. And the guy more or less just says, winners of the Cup Winners' Cup 1972, Glasgow Rangers, here, now on your bike, and away you go.
You've got to go up and get the cup and do that to your fans. That's what you're there for. And it wasn't allowed. You know, the Spanish police just ruined it. You know, and their overreaction was incredible.
I mean, I just walked into the dressing room and said, well, this is what Sporting Lisbon was all about, Bayern Munich was all about, and going back all the games we had played, and this is how we've got this cup tonight. And it was a big disappointment for the players.
I was over the moon to win it, but as you said, you didn't get to do a lap on or parade the cup or show it to the fans. Or they got present. We weren't sure if we were getting the cup.
And Willie Waddle stood up and said to everybody, you know, you don't realise what you lads have done tonight. He says, plenty of great Rangers sides in the past have been to finals, but they've never ever won it. He says you will be immortalised by Rangers fans for the rest of your life.
I remember we flew into Prestwick that day, and as I come through the customs with the cup, a customs officer, who must have been a Celtic supporter, stopped me, and he says, have you anything to declare? I says, no. He says, what's that? I says, it's a cup. He says, but did you take that with you? I says, no. I says, but I'm bringing it back with me.
John, how are you feeling at this particular moment, having got the cup back now at last to Scotland?
Delighted. Can't wait to get to Ibrox.
I travelled back with the team all the way back to Ibrox with the trophy, including a famous gaff.
Which of the two was the vital one? Do you think the first one or the one you got later on?
Oh, the squad one.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. What game was I at?
Went to Ibrox, they paraded the cup, and it was ideal that day. It was absolutely raining. It was really wet,
and it looked as if it was a coal lorry was parked there, and that's exactly what it was. It was an old coal lorry. That's all they could get at short notice.
That year, there was a joy in every game. You didn't realise it at the time, but you had a feeling that this was something good. And then the culmination is that you won it, which was great.
It was great for the supporters. Because Celtic had won the European Cup, I think it was great for us to think that, well, we're giving something back to supporters who travel all over Europe with us.
Cup Winners' Cup was a thing that really, we had a bit of pride. We could walk down the street, we could go, aye, how do you like that? It was that kind of feeling.
Part of a Rangers side that had won a European trophy for the first time. People were never ever going to forget that.
67 we'd got beaten at a European final. The club hadn't won anything for about 3 or 4 years, 5 years. The Ibrox disaster, and you want to give something back to the fans. The fans were the people that count, and that was where we thanked them.
It's impossible. Tell the sun to leave the sky. It's just impossible. It's impossible. Ask a baby not to cry. It's just impossible. Impossible.